Today, we're here in Côte d'Ivoire, in the Sassandra region in the west of the country. We're on a boat discovering the mangroves with Serge Doutché. Serge is founder and president of the local NGO Afrique Vert Environnement. That roughly translates to Green Environment Africa. He will be our guide for today's episode.
Là, on va faire un tour dans la mangrove.
We'll take a tour of the mangroves and then meet the communities of the Dabéda and Niani villages.
Welcome to Nature Answers, rural stories from a changing planet. Together, we explore stories of how communities in rural sub-Saharan Africa are working with nature to adapt to climate change. I'm your host, Ivy Prosper, joining you from Accra, Ghana. Today, we're traveling to a country about 500 kilometers west of me, Côte d'Ivoire. I live in Ghana. And did you know that Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire both share some cultural similarities? That's because the Akan people, who are one of West Africa's biggest ethnic groups, are in both Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. We're meeting a community that is making sacrifices. They hope what they're giving up is enough to build a sustainable future for themselves and the environment they rely on for the future. Sassandra is a town on the coast of Côte d'Ivoire. The region is characterized by its long sandy beaches. But it's not the beaches we're here to talk about today. It's the trees. Entire forests grow on the edge of the ocean here, even in the salty water itself. These are mangroves. Mangroves are a forest ecosystem made up of shrubs, trees, and palm trees, all united under the generic name of mangroves. But what they all have in common is that they all grow in salt water. Serge is working to protect and restore this vital ecosystem. Mangroves support fishing, an essential industry for the communities around them. They also play an important role in combating climate change.
Bon, les mangroves, c'est un écosystème assez spécial qui rend beaucoup de
Mangroves are a particularly special ecosystem. They provide many services to the very cycle of life itself. Mangroves not only provide fish, since fish reproduce in this environment. And then there are all the other fish products. But beyond that, mangroves also serve to regulate the air. They have the capacity to capture 10 times more greenhouse gases than natural forests.
Mangroves filter water, and they combat the coastal erosion that threatens some local communities. Serge takes our team through one of the patches of mangroves. The forest shades the shallow water, but the trees offer more than just shade. While the mangroves that grow here support fish, and therefore fishing, they also provide a more direct source of income.
Pendant longtemps ici, ça a été.
For a long time, mangroves were the main sources of fuel for smoking fish. So for a long time, these mangroves have been overexploited. When fish are smoked with this type of wood, they get a shine and color that make them more attractive to customers. So for a long time, women will demand that the young people who supply them with the wood bring them mangroves. It devastated the area.
Serge witnessed the devastation himself.
Le village de ma tante, voilà, qui est derrière le fleuve.
My aunt's village is behind the river. So every holiday, I would go and spend the vacations there. In the old days, when we went by the edge of the island, there were big trees and monkeys and bears all over with colors. But as the years went by, every time I came back, I realized that all the nature is beginning to disappear. And that's why I said to myself that we had to do something. Today, As you can see, it's nothing like it was before. It's as if everything has been devastated.
While cutting the mangroves is destructive to the ecosystem, it also provides significant income for the communities that need it. Jean-Claude Kaké is a fisherman in the village of Niani. For several years, he, like others in his community, have chopped down mangroves for income.
So me, by doing that, if I have my clients, I can make 200,000 francs a week in cash from the firewood bundles.
200,000 francs is equivalent to around 450 Canadian dollars. We can also compare it to the local price of rice. Rice is an important food staple here. 25 kilos of rice costs between 22 and 25,000 francs in this region, enough to feed a family of 10 for 2 weeks. So 200,000 francs a week is no small sum. It could feed a family for 4 months. But despite the money he could be earning, Jean-Claude and his neighbors had to make a difficult decision.
Before the arrival of Afrique Verte, we were really living off deforestation. In other words, the mangroves were where we used to put nets in to kill fish. But at the same time, they were used to make firewood. It meant they were cut down a lot to sell in town to the fancies. That's what they used to smoke the fish. We were able to send our children to school and feed our families well. Then we saw that the mangrove species were starting to disappear because everyone was making a living from them, because there was a lot of money to be made. So that's when Afrique Verte came. They said that the climate in Côte d'Ivoire was beginning to lose its effect. So we still had to try to protect the mangrove and reforest.
Different groups in town, like the Fantis, brought the wood to smoke fish. But faced with the destruction of the mangroves entirely, the community made a choice. Before they cut the mangroves, now they participate in their restoration. We'll come back to that. But for now, stopping the cutting has had consequences for the community.
So far, it's been around 3-4 years since we stopped cutting the mangroves. But our problems are multiplying. We can't afford to send our children to school. So now, halfway through, there's no more money to continue their studies. So we've stopped.
Costs can vary, but a local journalist told us that parents pay anywhere from 30,000 to 90,000 francs a year for the first few years of education. That's a couple $100 that many parents just don't have. And as the children grow older, the costs rise. Ève Inago is a member of the Niani Fish and Acheke Sellers Association. When our team met her, it was clear that she was worried about the future of her community without the sale of mangroves.
Before, when we cut the mangroves, we sold them and it paid for food to eat. We sold them and then we paid for the children's lessons. But since they came and said we had to stop cutting, we've stopped. It's no good.
For now, Ève's children do still go to school.
My kids are still going. However, there is my little sister's kids who were with me. As things weren't going well there, they've stopped school.
But with the loss of the mangrove profits, she worries that she'll have to stop her children from going to school as well.
I'm afraid because at the moment, if there aren't any means, the children will have to stay home. They can't go to school. That's what I'm afraid of.
Organizations that want to protect the environment have to balance the concerns of people like Ève with their concern for the future. It's exactly that makes a nature-based solution a nature-based solution. These are solutions that don't just protect the environment, but they also benefit communities. But there's trade-offs. Jules Komowe is the president of the local NGO that works on training programs. He organizes training courses for 8 to 15-year-olds on a range of subjects. One of the topics is protecting the local environment.
On parle beaucoup des mangroves, de l'environnement aux jeunes.
We talk a lot to young people about mangroves and the environment. And young people, that's young girls as well as young boys. We help them to get to know the mangroves, even virtually through images, videos, and slides. And we also tell them that the mangroves are what allows us to be well fed in Sassandra. Because when we really leave the mangroves alone, they allow us good fish to reproduce so that we can feed ourselves.
Jules says it's not enough to tell people to stop cutting mangroves. You also have to find them alternatives.
Il faut occuper les jeunes.
We need to keep the youngsters who feed off the mangroves busy. You have to find them the means to do so, or you have to set them up. If I have a job and they don't have the means to settle down, we have to look for ways to do it so that we can stop the mangroves from being destroyed, because the destruction is massive.
In Niani, they're looking for those alternatives. The locals are making fish traps. Selling them can bring in extra income, but the amount doesn't come close to what they had been earning from the mangroves. Serge says the NGO is looking for more lucrative alternatives, and he says that simply giving away money is not the right solution.
On a remarqué que quand on donne l'argent,
We've noticed that when we give money directly to communities, very often they don't achieve the objectives we've been looking for. So what do? We train them. For example, in the village we visited, we asked them what we would like to do instead of cutting mangroves to sell. They gave a variety of answers, but a large number proposed fish farming. So what will we do? If we ever get support in this direction, we will first train them in fish farming and then set up fish farms.
But for the moment, this support is not there. So why in the world would it benefit the community to stop cutting mangroves? The answer has to do with fish. The restoration of the mangroves is expected to increase the fish population, and more fish means more fishing, and that should help boost incomes in Niani. But it won't happen overnight.
Vraiment, le poisson manque parce que
There is a real shortage of fish. To tell you the truth, if you have to go all the way along the coast and cut through the mangrove, you will see it's there that the fish lay their eggs and then hatch. It's here that fish are created, and so the different species have started to disappear. We are no longer catching fish. That gets complicated. When you take a net and go fishing, you can't come up with a good score. It's not good. So the fish have disappeared with the protection that the shade provides. I think that in the long run, if everyone sticks to it, we will have lots of fish, and then we can live like we used to.
They're still waiting for the fish to return in large numbers. Until then, life will be harder than it was when they were selling mangrove wood. Getting children into school will remain complicated, but Niani, like other communities, has decided to continue protecting the mangroves to safeguard the future. And they're not just waiting for that future to arrive, they're directly getting involved in making it happen. We're now walking through the mud beside a mangrove in Broget, a village near Niani. This is one of the sites where Afrique Verte is carrying out a reforestation project. Here's Serge.
là on est sur un site de pépinière.
We are in a nursery site in the village of Brode. What you can see around us are biodegradable bags that we have filled with substrates made up of mud and sand, because mangroves grow in a muddy, sandy soil. So here's a bit of the substrate we use, and then we plant the seedlings. The seedlings are from the seeds in the red mangroves. So once they are big enough to be replanted, we move the nursery to the site where we are going to do the reforestation. And then we start planting. So soon we will be moving the plants that are here to a fairly degradable area to replant again.
Hundreds of plants can be seen growing alongside the mangrove. These seedlings will help to revitalize the mangrove and thus the fishery for the surrounding communities. And the NGO is not doing this alone.
Les populations justement sont formées aux techniques.
The local people are trained in the techniques involved, so that even after the project is over and the NGO is gone, they can continue to restore the degradable areas. So this is an innovation, because most of the time it was the experts from the organizations who came to do all the work. But this time around, the local people themselves are at the heart of this activity, because it's done through participation.
Jean-Claude is part of one of the local teams.
On fait des équipes, on prend les propagules et puis on va sur les sites.
We form teams, take the seedlings, and then go to the planting sites and plant. We do at least 3 or 4 days of planting a week, and then we just plant. It's a team, and I'm the team leader. The other village in Dabéda has another leader. So we call each other and say that today is planting day. We call each other and then we go to the site to plant and reforest with the women and everyone else.
It's that also makes this a real nature-based solution. The local people are involved in the process. The NGO began reforestation around 5 years ago. But there's still a lot to do. Here's Serge.
On est aujourd'hui à près de 1000 hectares.
Today, we have almost 1,000 hectares of degradable mangroves, and we've only worked on 340 hectares, and within the 340 hectares, we've done maison defense, which means that the areas were already preserved. So there is still a lot to do. We are talking about 809 hectares of degradable areas that we are going to have to restore.
There's still so much awareness raising that needs to be done. While communities like Dabéda and Niani are helping with restoration, mangrove cutting is still going on. Here's Jean-Claude.
Malgré nous, on peut arrêter, mais il y a d'autres villages qui n'ont pas encore compris.
In spite of ourselves, we can stop. But there are other villages that haven't yet understood the importance of this. So that means that while you are preserving here, others are destroying it.
NGOs are continuing their awareness-raising work. They work in town to convince those who smoke fish to stop buying mangrove wood, and they work in the mangroves talking to the people who are cutting them. Here's Jules.
C'est le franc-parler dans une version africaine. Le pardon.
It's straight talk in an African way, forgive me. If you destroy that, you destroy yourself. If you have 2, 3 mangroves, you have destroyed a mangrove today, you've finished it up. Tomorrow, you're going to need a bit more money. You are going to destroy the second and third, and there's nothing left. And tomorrow, are you going to cut up your son to send him to school? What will he eat? There are no more mangroves. There are no fish left in the village. For some, when you talk to them, you will notice that by the way he holds his machete, he is tense. His hand is tense, and you are discouraged because he looks at you in a certain way. He asked, "Big brother, are you going to do this to us?" "Really? Okay. I think you have 1,000 francs to give me, to return to me, eh?"
I'll note that first thing he said again, that to destroy a mangrove is to destroy yourself. It's heartbreaking that some decisions are made without thinking of the future. Destroying our environments for short-term gain only ensures long-term loss. If we ruin resources like mangroves, we're not just hurting nature, but we're hurting ourselves and leaving nothing for future generations. We should be striving to protect what sustains us. Like reforestation work, this process will take time, but despite the difficulties, the loss of income and all that comes with it, and the fact that others are still cutting and selling mangrove wood, Jean-Claude says he doesn't regret his community's decision.
Depuis les années 96 jusqu'à chose, vraiment, j'ai fait les enfants.
From 1996 until now, I've really raised my children with the fruits of the fishing, by my fishing, and that was good. But the truth is, there aren't any more fish, so we don't make anything.
Niani sacrificed the income from the mangroves in the name of the fish. They did so in hope that the future will be less difficult than it is today.
Ouais, la pêche, tu peux faire de ça.
In any case, you can fish. When the fish come back, we will make it. You can make it because you are a fisherman yourself. You fish, your wife will sell the fish. You see, when we get together, it makes something good. So the fishing can come back. If we all agree to protect it, it can come back. I have faith that it can come back.
This is Nature Answers from Farm Radio International. You can learn more about nature-based solutions and the people implementing them by subscribing to Nature Answers wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on social media at Farm Radio. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a story about how one woman, when she found herself far from home after her marriage, set out on a mission to improve her new community. Find pictures of the community on our website at farmradio.org/natureanswers. You'll also find transcripts and more about nature-based solutions there. And finally, share Nature Answers with your friends and family. We'd love to spread the word. Until next time, I'm your host, Ivy Prosper, coming to you from Accra, Ghana.
This episode was reported and produced in Côte d'Ivoire by me, Jack Wilson, with support from Andrea C. in Farm Radio International's office in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, Nina Kofi, journalist and radio host at Radio Assadi in Sassandra, Côte d'Ivoire, and fellow reporter Dominique Géné. Dominique and I were part of an internship program with Carleton University's School of Journalism. You can find me on X at Jack D.L. Wilson. The podcast was edited by Tara Sprickerhoff. Farm Radio compensated community members who participated in interviews. It is common practice to compensate a person in this region for the time they spend being interviewed. Our podcast would exclude many important perspectives if we only interviewed those who could afford to step away from their economic activities without compensation. Nature Answers was produced by Farm Radio International thanks to funding from the Government of Canada.